Good afternoon. I'm here with Senator David Leyonhjelm from the Liberal Democrats, and we're talking about the recent electoral success in the Western Australian Parliament. Senator, thank you for spending some time with us. Tomorrow you will be travelling to Perth to hear the inaugural speech of Aaron Stonehouse, the first ever Liberal Democrat elected to a state parliament. What is the significance of Aaron's election to the Western Australian Legislative Council?
Well, up to date, I've been the only member of Parliament for the party. So what Aaron's election signifies is that we're growing. We always knew we were growing. Our membership was expanding. We're raising a lot more money. We've got a lot more supporters and all those sorts of things. But in the end, for a political party, success means getting people elected to Parliament. And we need to increase that. We almost got 2 senators elected in the federal election. Came very close to getting our guy up in Queensland, but that didn't happen. So that left me still being the only member of Parliament. The election of Aaron Stonehouse in WA shows that we can do it elsewhere as well, and it's a sign of that the party is growing. We know what we're doing, and we're not just a fluke. We're not just a short-term, one politician party.
Okay, well that augurs well for the future. So what is the future for the Liberal Democrats in state parliaments?
There are a number of state parliaments where we think a small party can win seats, and obviously from small parties come big parties eventually. So, we're not going to stop it being a small party, but you have to be realistic. The Western Australian Parliament, the upper house, has an election system, a voting system which is relatively conducive to small parties getting elected, as the results showed. South Australian State Parliament has a similar arrangement. Victoria equally. New South Wales has a different system again. Preferences are less significant, but they have a very large ticket, so small parties can get a look in there as well and get elected, and indeed the small parties, minor parties, have had the balance of power in the New South Wales upper house now for quite a few years. Haven't used it very well, but nonetheless they've had it. So our aim is to provide the party with a substantial base around the state parliaments where election is possible, build up our presence in those states, use that also as a springboard in order to increase our vote for the Senate in future federal elections, and then in time, become not just a minor party, but a substantial party.
So just tell us about the makeup of the new crossbench in WA, and will Aaron be able to negotiate with the Labor Party? And furthermore, how will this affect the dynamics of Parliament?
Yeah, the Western Australian Legislative Council, the government there, Labor government now, since the election, won't have a majority. They will need either 1 or 2 votes. I'm not an expert on procedure in the Western Australian Parliament, and I'm not sure whether the President, who is the equivalent of the Speaker in the lower house, has a deliberative vote or not. If the President has a deliberative vote, then the Labor Party will need 1 vote from the crossbench if they are opposed by the Liberals and Nationals. If the President doesn't have a deliberative vote, then they'll need 2 votes to achieve a majority. Now, there are 5 crossbenches in the upper house. There's Aaron, there's 3 from One Nation and the Shooters and Fishers Party. So any one of those, or any 2 of those, if they go with Labor, would give them a majority. If the Liberal Party and National Party are opposed to them. Now obviously that's not all the time. There are often times in the Senate where I'm there where Liberals, Labor and the Greens even are all voting on the same side, so it doesn't matter what I think. But there are also plenty of times when that's not the case, when they're on opposite sides of the chamber in a vote, and the crossbench determines the outcome. So Aaron will be in that situation quite regularly, I would have thought, and he will be under pressure from the government to support their legislation, their bills. He'll be under pressure from the Liberals and Nationals not to support government's bills. So he'll be in a similar situation to what I am in the Senate.
So he's going to be a key player in the Western Australian Parliament.
He will be a key player. He will be probably even more of a key player in the Western Australian Legislative Council than I am in the Senate. Since the election, the last federal election in July last year, there are now 12 crossbench senators in the Senate, including Corey Bernardi, who was elected as a Liberal. I only have one vote, so one vote out of 12 is less significant than one vote out of 5. So I think he will have a great time negotiating with the government, explaining to them that no, you can't increase those taxes. No, you can't impose those nanny state rules, not with my vote anyway. The government will have to go off and find a vote from somewhere else on the crossbench. And if crossbench stick together fairly well, and the early signs are very encouraging, then potentially they could stop the government from, the new Labor government from doing some silly things.
Now we have a Facebook question here from Kyle, who's wondering about the strategy the party will have on urban seats. He's putting forward that rural seats are easy, but what about urban seats?
Well, that's primarily a question for lower house candidates, and that's not our priority at the moment, urban versus rural. In the upper house, there were metropolitan seats, plus agriculture and pastoral and so forth, but they're very big. There's only 6 of them in the whole state, and so they're very big. They bring in both towns and country, and I don't think there's a whole lot of difference that's relevant, at least to the Liberal Democrats, whether they're country or city. City seats, and the difference between city seats and country seats is mainly applicable to the lower house. We'll probably run candidates there in the next election, but we don't expect to win until we gain a bigger presence in the upper house.
Right, okay. What do you think will be the #1 priority for Aaron and the Liberal Democrats in Western Australia?
Aaron's shaping up as being an outstanding Libertarian Member of Parliament. He's obviously been listening to me over many years, over the last 3 years. He's listened to my speeches and read my articles and has digested them and become a Libertarian through and through. He has vowed, exactly as I have, to never vote for an increase in taxes or reduction in liberty. That's 2 very good rules to go by. Basically means you can judge probably about 2/3 of legislation and any other measures straight up. Do they increase taxes? Do they reduce liberty? No, I'm opposed to them if that's the case. So I think Aaron will be to the Western Australian political environment similar to what I have been in the federal environment in Canberra. He will be all of a sudden a voice of principle, consistent rules, consistent approach to legislation, not interested in playing silly political games, just clearly in favour of individual rights, responsibility, personal liberty.
Recently, Mark Latham saw the light and joined the Liberal Democrats. Do you think Mark joining is a sign that libertarianism can attract people from all sides?
Yes. There is a bit of a tendency to assume that the Liberal Democrats are naturally affiliated or naturally aligned with the Liberal Party. And I suppose probably it's true that more of our supporters, if they didn't support the Liberal Democrats, would support the Liberals than the Labor Party, although that may not have always been the case. In years gone by, the Labor Party was nowhere as sort of controlling as it is these days. I think it's a good sign, first of all, that or it's a sign that we should be very nice to Labor people, because you never know, they might be like Mark and realise the error of their ways and develop a liking for personal liberty. We are not, inherently a version of the Liberal Party. We are clearly a party of principle. We support small government, individual rights and responsibility. The Liberal Party mouths those things from time to time, particularly on the economic front. They will say, yes, we like low taxes and less spending and balancing the budget and all that sort of thing. They don't do them. But the Labor Party is also, it has a history, with, especially with the Hawke and Keating government, of eliminating tariffs, freeing up the economy, reducing spending, balancing the budget, doing all the things that Liberal governments should be doing. So, to say that Labor is beyond the pale, unsavable, socialists and all that sort of stuff is not accurate. The Greens are, although even then, occasionally I encounter Greens who say, I'm very confused. I agree with you on all your social policies. I'm not sure about your economic policies. To which my answer is simply, well, if you thought about if you're making some money and you don't like to see your taxes being frittered away, then you're not a very good Green, because that's all they're interested in. So Mark Latham is not the first former Labor person who will join the Liberal Democrats. I'm sure there'll be plenty more. I know, I'm not going to mention any names, but I know of a number of former Labor people who are very, very fond of what I'm doing, very keen on what I'm doing, very supportive. They say to me, keep doing what you're doing, David, you're doing a great job, I completely support you, or I support you on 90% of your policies, or something like that. So it's not, it's nothing unique about what Mark has done. It's just that he's been, prominent about it, very, very open about it.
Just touching on the Greens there, Hayden wants to know, has sent in a question. He previously ran for the Greens, and he wants to know whether he would be blacklisted from ever running for the Liberal Democrats.
No, everybody is can realise the error of their ways and do better. Having run for the Greens as a candidate when you're young is not necessarily a bad thing anyway. There is an old saying that applied to me: if you're not a socialist at 20, you've got no heart, but if you're still a socialist at 40, you've got no brains. So hopefully he had a heart, and now he's discovering he also has a brain. The thing is, though, that the rule is you cannot be a candidate for the Liberal Democrats until you've been a member in good standing for a while, at least in a winnable position. We might run you in a seat where you've got no chance of winning, but we wouldn't allow somebody who we don't know, who hasn't served their time in the party, to run in a winnable position and potentially represent the party in Parliament, unless we're confident that they are a genuine Libertarian. And that goes for prominent people like Mark, as it does for people who aren't prominent.
And that all makes sense too, because the party's got to uphold its values. Pippa would like to know, how did you go with the amendment to the e-cigarette legislation?
That hasn't been considered yet. The Therapeutic Goods Amendment Bill, to which my amendment is related, was on the notice paper in the last sitting period, but it never came up. It was a very disorganised, chaotic sitting week. It was only 3 days, it was budget week, and lots of speeches and not very much legislation dealt with. This happens a lot in the Senate, a great deal of wasted time, and it can be quite frustrating because you think something is going to get considered and it doesn't get considered. But it's there waiting to be brought on.
Right, okay. Mitchell has a question about the flat tax. He's saying he supports the idea of a flat tax, the Liberal Democrats' policy, and he wants to know, how do you convince people on the lower incomes to support a flat tax?
Oh, well, our policy is also to have a tax-free threshold of $40,000. So that would mean you wouldn't pay any tax, no flat tax, nothing on your income up until you started earning over $40,000. And then you would be paying 20% on the amount over $40,000. So that means people on low incomes wouldn't pay very much wouldn't pay very much tax until they were earning a reasonable sort of money.
Right.
It would be a very substantial reduction in income tax, and would actually be quite an incentive for people to, earn more money in the knowledge that they were going to keep it.
Now, an issue that is of concern, I know, to some Liberal Democrat supporters, that Mark Latham, who we were talking about before, is not openly supportive of firearms in the community, and so some Liberal Democrat members are a bit concerned that he's a member and he may at some stage speak or represent Liberal Democrats. How do you respond to that?
Well, we don't question the views of people. We don't inquire into the views of people before they join a party. So obviously we didn't do that in the case of Mark, nor did we do it in the case of the 6,000 or 7,000 other people who've joined the party. If they want to join the party and abide by the party rules, that's the only obligation. They have to abide by the party rules, constitution. They can join the party, even if they disagree with 95% of our policies. So the only issue really in relation to people like Mark who don't agree with a fairly important issue to the Liberal Democrats is whether we put them up as a candidate. And there's no discussion about that at this point. There's not much chance of Mark being a candidate in the short term, at least. I'm not aware that he's particularly pushing for that. He's a bit wary about getting back into politics. He likes his role in the media and commenting on politics, but becoming a politician again, I'm not sure that he's falling over himself to do that anyway. But even if he did, he would have to compete with other other candidates within the party who also want to be elected. Now, the other thing about attitudes to things like guns or same-sex marriage or drugs or anything like that where people are a little bit uncomfortable with our policies is people can change their mind. It's interesting that Mark has been very open and honest about his views about guns, and what was discovered is that he doesn't know a lot about them. He hasn't had a lot of exposure to them, and so a couple of our members have taken that on as a challenge, and they're going to take him shooting, introduce him to guns, give him a bit of exposure to it, and then perhaps, and Mark's quite an intelligent guy, in fact very intelligent, the likelihood is he will have a bit of a think about his views on guns as a result of knowing more about them, having a go at them, being exposed to shooters who are just normal, regular people. And it's a very good chance that he will have a little think about whether his views are soundly based. That's what intelligent people do. John Maynard Keynes says when the facts change, you've got to change your views. What else do you do? And applies to guns as much as everything else.
Well, that's excellent. I'm sure there'll be a lot of Liberal Democrat members who will be pleased to hear that. Thank you very much, Senator David Leyonhjelm, for spending some time with us this afternoon.